What is happening, Internet? What's up, everybody? Welcome to another fine episode of the Nance Cast. Today we were joined by the homie K Mittelstaedt. Go follow him on Substack. I'll actually put his info in the show notes and all that stuff, so you guys can give him a follow. I like what he's doing. I like where he's going. I like where he's taking his position and his argument. It's really good. It's about narcissism. But it's not about narcissism to sit here and like try to label people and diagnose people and I don't know, call people nasty names or anything like that. Like he really is trying to discuss the world's problems, from the angle that he sees fit, that, from his perspective, this makes the most sense to talk about these things in this way. And it's excellent. Now, we will be doing a follow-up to this conversation soon. So it'll be kind of a part two or even a continuation of this conversation, but we'll also get into other stuff we didn't get into at all. And for this episode, just go ahead and sit back and give it a listen. He's a great guy. I like him a lot. Go ahead and give him a follow. Check out his work. Enter conversation with him. I think he's got an excellent position, and he does break it down well. We were talking after we recorded this episode, and he was like, man, I feel like I didn't do a good job explaining it. I think he did a great job explaining it. I think you'll agree with me. And yeah, give it a watch. Welcome, Sean. And we'll see you soon. Like I said, we'll be doing a follow-up to this conversation pretty soon. And without further ado, we'll go ahead and get right into it. So, the whole plugging, introducing, and plugging, I don't know, man. I guess I'm not good at that. I just introduced him. And as far as a plug goes, follow him on Substack. That's where you'll find his latest work and all that good stuff. So we'll see you soon. Thanks, guys. Thanks, folks.
It's the best podcast ever! Welcome, you're listening to the Nance. Yes!
All right, now we're recording.
Cool. I guess it's just like a ongoing obsession to get to the heart of things, an ongoing obsession to figure out like what's wrong with people, because it just seems like intuitively there has to be something the matter with people that's like particular to our time that we live in now, particular to the material conditions that we find ourselves in right now, and a strong suspicion that it's not something that's always been the matter with people. It's something that's new that's the matter with people. Like, people are always fucked up, but like the question is, how are they fucked up now, as opposed to like in Freud's day, how are they fucked up then? And and like the starting point for that for me is like Christopher Lasch and talking about how there's more personality issues as opposed to like neuroses. There's more of an emphasis on like borderline issues. Like, it goes by a lot of different names. There's borderline personality. There's narcissism, of course.
APD.
And then there's also like, and then there's like, I really think that it's very close to what Zizek's talking about too with perversion. To make that claim like for real, to like be like, okay, these are the same thing. I'd have to do a lot more work and like Lacanian shit. But they have to be closely related or really similar. Like, talking about different angles of the same thing is my strong suspicion. You know what I mean?
So, yeah, dude, Freud. It was a long time ago. Somebody was like, "Can we stop reading Freud?" And then this was on Twitter, back when I was on Twitter, somebody was like, "Can we stop reading Freud already?" And I like thumbed up that tweet or hearted it or whatever the fuck you do on Twitter. And then like the immediate response was like, "No, we can't, because it still matters." And I like hearted that too, because I was like, yeah, that sums it up. Like, things have changed. Like, things are not the way they were at the turn of the 20th century. We are not dealing with the same subjects, both like socioeconomically, but also, I don't know, just in general, like to want to have like a broad understanding of the world we live in today. You do not to say stop reading Freud. No, we can't stop reading Freud already. But we do need to update it. Like, we need a firmware update.
Yeah. Dude, the question, and the question is like, who's Freud? Because there's a lot of Freuds out there, and like, he's hard to interpret because he has like a weird style. He's clear, but at the same time, he's like enigmatic at the same time. You know, it's like there's some
like
things where like
reading-
people are still arguing about like how literally do we take this, or how much is this a metaphor?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, or it's
Sometimes
Oedipus
a cigar
complex,
is just
or-
a cigar.
Yeah.
I like reading Freud like he's more Jung than Jung. Like, Jung is seen as like the weird mystic and all the spooky, goofy god shit, but Freud is, I think, taken as like more material. I like reading Freud as if he's just as mystical as Jung, if not more so.
Dude, you're onto something there, I think.
I don't know about that.
No, you are. Have you read Philip Reef's book on Freud?
No, but I have heard you talk about it.
Yeah. It's Freud, the Mind of the Moralist. But it's so good. I haven't even finished it yet because it's that good.
Yeah.
That it's like I'm reading it super slowly and like stopping every
Savoring
other
it.
paragraph and writing notes and like looking things up, and but it's so good. It's I like his Freud a lot. And like, so he talks about how like Freud was a super voracious reader, like read everything. Like, humanities library was massive, and so did Jung. But in Jung, that all comes out in Jung's work.
Yeah.
And then for Freud, none of it does. Like, except for like the Greeks, you know, because he names a lot of things and after Greek ideas and Greek myths. But besides that, for the most part, most of it doesn't come out in his work because he's trying to maintain this like veneer of scientific respectability to really just to Reef seems to present it as he's just trying to like appease his age, you know. And that's still and at his time he was accused of being unscientific, and that's still the main critique of Freud today, is that he's not scientific enough. Even though he was really trying to make it scientific.
There's only so much you can do. I mean, there really is only so much you can do with the quote unquote soft sciences. Like, it's not material. Like, it literally is subjective. So I think there will always be people who levy that, oh, it's not scientific. Of course, it's not the same type of scientific as like the material sciences and math and shit like this. This is dealing with interiority. This is dealing with subjectivity. So of course it's subjective. But no, I do think he really did try to do this exhaustive thing where he was like, well, we're people. We all seem to have this this equipment in common. The consciousness, subjectivity, blah, 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 language. Let's try to do whatever we can do to figure out like the commonalities. Like it like he is looking for a method, a rigorous method. And I think he does achieve a rigorous method. But again, it needs to be updated. We're living in the future.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think maybe people would be upset and you know, say sensational things about what you're trying to do. And I think it's cool that you're like, yeah, I'm not trying to do anything. I am just trying to understand it. Because I don't think you're out here trying to make any sensational claims. I think you're just trying to understand stuff. And you've been talking about narcissism and community and identity and these things for a while now. And I like what you have to say about it all. It kind of coincides with a lot of the thoughts I've found myself having that have to do with identity and like subjectivity and how we respond to our material conditions and what the fuck is wrong with us. Because again, it's very clear that something is wrong with us. So what might it be. The other day we were talking about the suburbs.
Yeah.
The suburbs are fascinating, dude. I don't know.
And I want to say, like, when it comes to like narcissism, I think like that the reason I brought up that like scientific part is that it gets weird when you're saying like you're announcing something as a pathology or saying that like certain people are pathological, etc. But like what Reef points out, this is why really like Reef's Freud, is that like a lot of the scientific side of Freud is like a lot of it is him trying to save face, a lot of in the sense of like he's trying to be respectable, you know,
For sure,
and
for
it's not
sure.
and it's not that psychoanalysis is entirely unscientific, but it's weird to be too scientific when you're talking about people
People, dude.
because then you've put yourself, the second you do that, you've put yourself in the position of God, to
Hmm.
like the position like you have a magnifying glass to all the ants. And what's important about psychoanalysis is not that element of it. What's important about it is that there's the sense of implicating yourself, like transference, for instance, like
Hmm.
implicating the observer in the observed.
Hmm.
And that's so important when you're talking about people, and you have to do that when you're talking about people. Otherwise, you're doing something false. You're lying. You're doing something, it's a pretense of objectivity where you're
Yeah.
trying to act like you're outside of what you're talking about, and you can't possibly be. That's why talking about people is just different, you know?
I mean, I think people in the material sciences get that wrong too, and in math get that wrong
Yeah,
too.
maybe.
They fail to account
Yeah.
for their position. I mean, I think
Yeah, like in,
that lends itself to the scientism that we've kind of seen
yeah.
taking over the world. I've been working on a piece for a while now about hyper enchantment, and it has to do with that. And it's like in the wake of Adorno and Horkheimer, and you know, disenchantment, and is it re-enchantment? No, I'm calling it hyper enchantment, this and that. But so yeah,
Mm.
I don't believe in objectivity at all.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a bit bold, but it works.
Yeah, yeah.
It works
But
for this conversation. But it's even more impossible when, again, we're dealing with subjectivity, we're dealing with interiority, and you have to account for yourself and your position in the matter. You have thoughts, you have feelings, you have interpretations, you have the hermeneutic.
Yeah.
So doing like a phenomenological analysis, like accounting for your position in the hermeneutic circle, I think is necessary. And yeah, it does seem like there are a lot of people who can't do that. It seems like there are a lot of people who think they're doing psychoanalysis or like think they're engaged in psychoanalytic theory, but they seem very, very certain about a lot of things. I don't know, and yeah, that's weird. So maybe maybe we should grant Freud more weirdness. Again, I like to read him as if he's doing weird stuff. But maybe you're right. Maybe that is something like worth doing instead of just like a fun thing to do.
Well, I think you're right about like all the sciences. It's just even more like the contradiction is just even more extreme when you try and treat people like that. You know, it's just even more intense. But I think you're right. That is like to some extent, like that's true of all the science and like all the sciences and like, yeah. And this is why that book is called The Mind of the Moralist, because he's pointing out that like what Freud's really, he might use scientific language. What he's really concerned about is character.
Mm.
That's what he's really concerned about. It's not like today in the sort of like scientific sort of ego psychology world. It's about like this objective category of health. And like, who fucking cares about health? You know, like I don't think Freud really cared about, he only cared about health just as much as you needed to. Like he wasn't overly obsessed about it, where it's like we need to make like the perfectly well-adjusted person. That was not Freud's goal at all. It was like we need to make you so that you can like have a life, and then the rest is up to you, dude. I don't care about solving all of your little neuroses. I don't give a shit. You know, it's just like We need to make it so that you can live a life worth living, and that's it. That's all we care about.
It's crazy. It definitely does seem like today there is a general push for the perfectly well-adjusted individual,
Which
rather
is
than just
insane.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
insane because the perfectly well-adjusted individual, that's like it's like an automaton, you
yeah,
know? That's like a perfect aspect of society with no individuality at all, which is a
yeah,
funny contradiction at the same time as we tend to think of our culture as hyper individualistic.
yeah,
It's a really funny contradiction. And that's why like
yeah.
you have to have an understanding, I think, between like false individualism and true individualism. You know, like what's pretending to be individualism and what is individualism? Like what do we even mean when we say individualism, you know?
What do you think, like, and I don't know, this is actually probably a stupid question, but like, because it's obviously complex and it's obviously like an ongoing thing, but I don't know, like thinking about this problem and the fact that there is this quest for the perfectly well-adjusted individual, or maybe not quest for it, but there seems to be like a mandate that you must be perfectly well-adjusted, and if you're not, then something's wrong with you. You're toxic, or you're radical, or
Yeah.
you're
And we got to physically fix your brain.
yeah,
Yeah.
and
Like
it's
not
all
just
like
talk it out.
it all serves like the condition where people can't live fulfilling lives. People can't live lives that are worth living because you have to look exactly the same. Like you have to be a cookie cutter cutout of the guy next to you, and there's no difference. There's no negativity. There's no stratification or anything like that. It's just
Right.
everybody's all the same.
Which leads to people like really wanting to differentiate themselves really strongly and look really trying, going out of their way to try and differentiate themselves, you know, and like try and be the like prove how much of an individual they are because like deep down we all know that we're not, you know.
Like where, I don't know, man. Where would we start? Like if we were to do something about it, where would we start? Like, could we organize something that would bring us close to a solution? Could we theorize something that could bring us close to a solution? Would we have to have like a total revolution or something that totally upsets like the world order today? Like I don't know. Like I think that's the stupid question I was going to ask. Like is it something that we can work on as individuals, or is it like this total problem that something has to change, something that's out of our control, out of our influence has to change? I don't know. Because I think it's a stupid question because I think the answer is it's both. But
well, it might be both. It might be both, but we have to start somewhere, you know? And so, yeah, I mean, since you have to start somewhere, you do kind of have to start at the level of the individual, which is weird because it's a social problem. But because you have to start somewhere, you got to start somewhere, you know? And so I don't know where to start. I guess it's like just starting to like try and become aware of your own mind, know yourself, you know? And just for an example as to like why it is the case that like we aren't as individualistic as we think we are. We tend to think we are, but then like where's know thyself from? It's from like ancient fucking Athens. You know, it's from a time before modern individualism, you know, was that idea that know thyself, you know. So in like I think we really obsess over choice. We really love our modern choice. And I like modern choice, but I think like the postmodern choice that we have now is like wildly overrated. Like I was just scribbling something earlier, like kind of thinking about this, and I was like trying to figure out like what makes the concept of the individual different. And so my notes were it's like pre-modern individualism is like, this is who I am because, for example, like this is who I am because this is who my father was,
Mm.
but I could be otherwise. And that's the individualism part where you're like, I could be otherwise than I am, you know? And then like modern individualism would be like, this is who I am because I am because I'm good at or have been able to achieve, because this is what I'm good at or have been able to achieve,
Hmm.
but I could have been otherwise, you know? And then like the postmodern individualism, or you could say like false individualism is like, this is who I am because I created myself as such sui generis, you
Hmm.
know? And I feel like we live in this kind of fantasy of like, I created myself sui generis. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Out of nothing.
So it's like a weird disavowal of of the world around you and like material conditions and your socially constituted nature as like a human, a subject, a member of a society. It is weird. It's a weird thing where it's like you
But
are the
but
only
it
real person here, but you also don't matter at all unless you're exactly like all these other people. Like you have to
but
be.
crucially that consciousness comes out of the fact, I think, that it's actually like society has invaded everything. The public has invaded everything.
Mm,
So that's actually a defensive posture. Uh, and this is where we get into narcissism, right? It's a
okay.
defensive posture where you're like, where you think you fantasize as though you've created yourself out of nothing because you're really embattled, right? Hence why Christopher Lash's second book on narcissism was called the minimal self,
Mm,
because this is all a defensive idea. Um, and like I like to think about how so I'm getting into stuff that I'm like that are more notes just because it's like on the top of my head.
let's do it, dude.
And I'm excited to think about it and talk about it because I'm expanding actively like what I've been thinking about.
Yeah.
Like I think that Freud and Descartes in different ways both like they wanted to circle the wagons. They wanted to protect the individual.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think like you can read in Descartes like his um shit, what was it called? He had like an organ in the brain. I'm drawing a blank on what it's called.
Oh,
Where like that was where the soul lived.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
drawing a blank
yeah,
on what
yeah,
it's
yeah.
called. But like his dualism, right?
Yep.
His mind body dualism is like you could try and read between the lines and be like, what is he really saying here? Like implicitly, I think he's sacralizing the individual in
Mm.
the face of modernity. Like things are starting to become deterritorialized, and maybe everything can be scientized. Like
Mm-hmm.
maybe science can go everywhere. Maybe the market can go everywhere. You know, the old feudal relations are breaking down, and so where in this scientific schema are we gonna place the individual and protect it? So that it can't be tampered with and can remain sacred. Well, I'm
Mm.
going to create an organ in the brain for it, you know? And then Freud comes along and in a different way sets up the individual's character and says that like um want sort of just to a certain extent to him character is destiny and he wants to sort of like protect the human character and foster the human character and develop it and not and remove its neurotic roadblocks and
Mm.
protect this hard kernel of character from society, which is sort of beginning to bear down on it even more. And then by this point it's just the barriers are shattered. Like there's no distinct, we can't tell the difference between where the market ends and where our psyche begins. You know, we
Mm.
have like the intense desire for like your own little self-created, perfectly unique individual identity is like a fleeing from the fact that we can't tell the difference between our psyche in the market or our psyche in the public. It's invaded everything. You know, specifically in the neoliberal era, it's the commoditization of everything.
I
So
like that, dude.
we're besieged. You know,
Identity is a flight from the public, the social, the market, the commodity
but
form. Like,
like because we call like shared resources public property, I think we get a little confused.
Mm.
I think the public isn't contracting. I think the public is like too big and it's everywhere. You know, like we have at this point, we have devices listening to us.
Yeah.
That's the public in your space. You know, we have cameras. Like I willingly put this camera up in my own house.
Yeah, in the house.
Like that's the
Yeah, yeah,
public
yeah.
in my space, you know?
Yeah. There's
Like that was not a thing before.
there's been a weird inversion, or maybe not inversion, but yeah, there's been an invasion. Outside has gotten inside. Like outside the home has been brought inside. And there are a lot of people who show their ass and like do messy shit out in public, out and about. And it's like you should probably do that like in your home, but the distinction isn't what it was. The distinction might not even be real anymore.
Yeah.
And that takes a toll. But narcissism, like it's a word that I don't know. A lot of people use it. I think most people have their own private meaning of it.
Yeah.
It might sometimes it might be kind of sensational when you hear the word. It's like, whoa, what is it? What is it? But the fact that you're kind of you're highlighting it. You're saying this is narcissism. Let's fucking break that down, or you break that down.
Yeah, I think most of the time when people use it, it sounds either more intellectual than to just call someone a selfish asshole. And so you use it to like sound like you're more authoritative when you're calling someone a selfish asshole because it sounds kind of scientific. It's got like a psychological veneer to it, you know?
For sure. It becomes the kind of fallacy where you're like, I know what I'm saying, and that guy sucks.
Yeah, yeah. And I think my first draft of like the essay that we did at the turn, I think it sort of came off that way a little bit. And I sort of I was like, oh shit. I didn't realize that's how my voice was coming across. I need to change that shit. So I rewrote some shit in it. Cause that's that whole scientistic thing that I think is the wrong way to go. Like we have to deal with like what we're really concerned about is like the development of character, which is not a conversation that we usually have at all. Which is why I really appreciate Studebaker's work a lot, because that's what he's talking about. He's like trying to get us from Eros to agape. Freud was concerned about the same thing. Freud wanted, I don't know if Freud cared about agape, but he wanted to move us up from Eros. You know what I mean? So yeah, that makes me think like, I'm like, did Freud care? No, I don't think Freud went as far as agape. I don't know that he did or wanted to. That might have been like the oceanic feeling, the watery love that he wouldn't have cared about so much. But he did care about getting us out up like beyond mere Eros, you know.
By the way, I don't think you came off like an asshole in that essay.
Oh no,
I don't, and I think a lot of the feedback you got was valid. But I also don't think you came off like an asshole. I thought it was great. My main problem was like a semantic fucking problem. Like it was just about the specific meaning of a specific word. And it wasn't the fact that you were using narcissism. But it is like it's this fucking word that like some people I think don't even ever, like it never registers. They're like, yeah, narcissism, whatever. But I think a lot of people hear that word and like their hackles kind of come up because it can be such a fucking slippery word. But I think you did a good job in that, like walking us through it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Dude, and what's funny is that like Christopher Lash's first book on the topic was like the same conversation, and then like 50 years later we're still having the same conversation. Like society's discussion has just not advanced at all. Like he was already going back into like literature and talking about how people were using the term in a way that was like already divorced from the psychoanalytic literature.
Yeah.
And being like, there's a lot of people who are like smart at observing people, and that's what they do for a living, and like they have a really specific meaning behind this.
Yeah.
And all y'all are kind of just throwing it around, not paying any attention to that. And he wrote like 2 books on it, and then he just it seems like he wrote one book and then he wrote another book because I'm like, still people aren't
Yeah.
listening. Then he just gave up. He was
He's
like,
like,
fuck
"Fuck it."
it. And
So-
never returned to it again.
So, because like,
So let me get into it. Let me just like,
yeah, okay.
yeah. So, um, I think that I want to say like, and it might be too simple because like Lash says, like narcissism is a difficult idea that appears simple, and so it lends itself to misunderstandings. But like, let me give just like this is my favorite one sentence definition is just that I think narcissism is any identity with which you give yourself. That's my that's my one sentence stab at it. It might not be perfect, but I'm trying to make it like something so that people can hold on to, and then as long as they don't want to stop there, then they can go from there.
So
like,
that one liner, I like that a lot. It smacks of community as well, and community is something we've talked about and problematized. But like the notion of community in the world we live in today is broken, because there's like this implicit belief that it's perfect and there's a one-to-one identification, and like that's what's wrong with it. Like it's pure positivity, and that's dysfunctional. That doesn't work. It can lead to terrible things, bigotry. If you think you and I perfectly align on something, then we're gonna become this positive feedback loop, and we're eventually gonna start to think we're better than everyone else who's just different. Difference and negation shouldn't be moralized. And that's what pure positivity does, and that's what perfect identification does. But taking that from community and then applying it to the identity, I don't think I had that thought until I read that one-liner, and I heard you say it, and then it clicked. It was like, okay, I get that. So if I run around calling myself a punk rocker and I'm really excited about it, and I spend all my time, I get the stud jacket, I get the cool haircut, I get the Circle Jerks t-shirt, and I'm like, I'm a punk rocker, and I'm really invested in it, and I relate to the world through that category, through that label, that identity, then I would be doing a narcissism.
Not necessarily. It has to like see, this is why like a one sentence definition is like impossible. You know what I mean?
For sure.
Because I think like that's why in that essay that I wrote, I distinguished between like the punk rocker of today is more likely a narcissist than the punk rocker of like the 1980s.
Yeah.
Because the punk rocker of the 1980s was probably primarily wanted to belong to a community, and that's why they were a punk rocker. Not necessarily, but probably more likely. And today, because we have less of that mentality, the punk rocker is just copying the aesthetic in order to differentiate themselves as being unique. Instead of trying to belong, they're trying to be different. And so that gets back to like, so why are they doing it? Is it because they want to be part of a community and find their identity, get their identity derived from a community? Or do they feel that they have no identity, and so they're trying to make one up? So it's all with the motivation. So let me just read this, and then we can talk about that examples and everything else. Is so lacking a culture from which to derive an identity of oneself must nevertheless continue to relate with oneself. Culture is the transitional object itself, which orients us in relation as careful beings. You can't see the hyphen there, care-full, careful beings, to the very indifference of nature. We cannot cognize the thing in itself, and even our perceptions confess to the indifference which appears radically at odds to the love of a mother's embrace. On leaving the womb, we take up a precious blanket. That's the transitional object in Winnicott. Since it smells of our mother, even while she is not immediately nearby. All culture is precisely that enjoyable comfort. Becoming an adult is only the metaphorization of the transitional object, so that we can leave the scent of the mother behind. It is obvious that secondary or pathological narcissism would accompany a culture in decay, which is a world with insufficient maternal metaphors. Pathological narcissism emerges. And this is a quote from Christopher Lasch. Quote, if the child for some reason experiences this separation from the mother with sorry, I can't read my own handwriting. If the child for some reason experiences this separation trauma, the separation from the mother with special intensity, that quote for some reason is the threadbare social fabric with more holes in it than Swiss cheese half eaten by mice. So what I'm trying to get at there is that, like, if the social fabric is broken down, if the symbolic order is frayed or weak, we end up not having enough cultural objects to relate to. And then we end up lost. We end up wandering. We end up without a home, not without a home, but without waypoints, without markers that we can use to find, to relate to and find our bearing in the world. So does any of that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, like, everything is just kind of like free floating, and we are kind of floating in a void. We're not able to be rooted in anything in the social or in the world around us. Like, we are, it is like postmodernity. Like, it's all just up in the air, and it's like, fuck, nothing is real, nothing matters. I don't know who I am. I don't know where I belong. And then taking that
and then what we want to do,
affirming it and doing this weird affirmation of the difference or of the negation to try to stand out as an individual, rather than like seeking a groundless ground. You're just saying, well, grounds are impossible. Like postmodernity. Like,
no, I think it's almost desperately. It's trying to be your own ground, to try and create your own ground, because you find yourself out in the darkness, lost in the woods, and you just like are trying to conjure something up that makes you feel comforted out of nothing. And this is why, like, narcissism is often so related to like the maternal superego, and it's so like it's like a running back to the womb. So it's like it's a running for comfort, a running for shelter. So it's a desperation there,
Yeah.
I don't know if any of that makes sense, but I'm trying to like simplify it at the same time as I want to complexify it, so that we don't walk away with a misunderstanding. But also, like, I want something for people to be able to hold on to at the same time. So I'm trying to walk that tightrope,
I think it definitely does. And I think, like, rather than, like, we find ourselves already here. The world is fucked up and terrifying. We're in this dark forest, and we don't know where we are. And of course, we're going to derive comfort somehow. And one way we could do so, and this is going to mix metaphors here, but like one way you can do so is by acknowledging the fact that you are part of something bigger than yourself. And, we collectively have lost our way, and we need to find it. We need to come together. But then the narcissist response is to say, I have to do this all on my own. I have to create markers and waypoints, and I have to create this identity out of whole cloth, and no one is going to help. I did this all on my own. And so, yeah, both choices, and let's not say there's only two, there's a myriad choices, but like, they're both responses to this kind of the trauma of subjectivity, the trauma of like modern subjectivity, where we are in this horrifying world, and we are lost. But seeking comfort in the other is one way to do it, and seeking comfort in the self is this kind of narcissist way to do it. Now that's my take, and like restating back to you of what I just got from you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It is. It's a comfort in the self because, like, I mean, the root of narcissism is self-love originally. But if we think about like the story of Narcissus, where like Freud likes to like draw a lot of his names and things from Greek myths. Like the story of Narcissus is like falling in love with your image. And I think that's it. And I think that's a really useful metaphor because it's not maybe the easiest way to get in is it's not self-love. It's like self-love coming back as self-hatred and self-loathing, you know?
Sure. Yeah. So I guess a term I've often used is like paranoiac narcissism, or like you're a paranoid narcissist. And I think I've said before, like, I think everybody is a paranoid narcissist. We are all in this state of like, we're fascinated with how much we hate ourselves, and we're fascinated with how much we imagine everyone else hates us. Now that's probably a perversion of the terms paranoid and narcissist, but I like I've used it all along. But so is the element of like hate in narcissism in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, I think it ends up resulting in like a self-hatred, but I don't know. That's not the part that I focus on just because I think it can result in a lot of things. Like it.
Okay. So these are,
it's like, there's a lot of reasons to be like, I don't know, a lot of like, you can't like look at one behavior ever and be like, oh, that guy's like someone bragging. They might be doing it because they're just
legit happy
like,
about something.
Yeah, and they're just like, I did it. I know I can do it. And I think it's like, really, it's like an overinvestment in like, it's funny because a lot of people, like I hear like Lacanians talking about like perversion and the fact that people want to be identical to their symbolic identity. And I feel, and like they over-identify with their symbolic position. And I feel like narcissism squares the circle in a way where it's like, you're over-identifying with your symbolic position, but because you're not confident at all in yourself in a way. Like, I don't know. I don't know if I'm doing a good job explaining any of this. Like, it was all so clear in my head. And like,
I think
I try and explain it. Yeah.
I think it's pretty clear. So how much, like in your essay and in like some of the conversations we've had, you do a lot of this like psychoanalysis and like subjectivity, and I think you're better on that than I am, but
I'm not comfortable there. Yeah,
for sure. I mean, good.
I want to be able to bring it down to the level where I can talk to anyone about it, you know, and I'm working on that, you know, but I feel like it was necessary to start there, you know.
Well, I think that was great. I think I'm tracking. I think probably, I think you do a good job of breaking it down. My big question is, I feel like I've arrived at like a similar kind of idea about what's happening with identity and community and subjectivity, but I've come at it from like a material, like I focus on like the commodity form. Like I'm not over here really doing a lot of psychoanalysis work. But I feel like I've still arrived at least in the same ballpark as where you're at. And I think that's my biggest question is like how much of this do you think is going on in the commodity form itself versus in the subject?
Yeah, well, I think that the commodity is one of those things that we like to use for grasping at straws, like It's like you used to get your identity from like inheriting your father's trait or whatever,
Yeah.
like a pre-modern subjectivity. Like that's where your identity came from. And I think you ended up becoming more an individual in the sense of like independence and separation and like self-assuredness because when you're supposed to be like your father's son, it's hard to miss the fact that you aren't your father though. But when
Mm,
you're supposed to be an individual, it's easy to miss the fact that you aren't really an individual, you
mm.
know? Like when you're not trying to earn it or trying to fight for your individuality, you know? And so the commodity form, I think, is key because it's like it's one of the things we use um to be like, this is what I am, this is who I am, this is how I'm separate from everyone else
Yeah.
because I'm this kind of a consumer because I like these games, I like this, you know, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Um, and so I like these books
I
even.
like my
And
t-shirt.
so it's like, yeah, so it's like, so it's one of the things we use to try and desperately differentiate ourselves when we're becoming more and more and more similar. And it's a way
Differentiation.
and it's a way we can use as an excuse like look, I'm this kind of a consumer so I don't need to differentiate myself in any other way, you know.
Yeah. It sounds like narcissism is like um it's like a positive affirmation of difference, um but like not actual difference, just like perceived or imagined difference. um and because we live here in the future and post-modernity is an apt description of the world we live in, like it is just infinite difference, like just this infinite regression of difference until, like there is no, like the identity, there's no such thing as an identity anymore in the social. Like an identity is always necessarily this particular thing.
Mhm.
um
Well, and to bring like Gerard in, if we are trying to differentiate ourselves on the basis of desire,
mm,
that's gonna backfire immediately because desire is mimetic. We desire things.
yeah.
We desire things, especially when we're looking for identity. When we see that someone else desires it. Um, so I I want to like that's why people want like prestige. That's why people want what's the word?
That's why I buy Ray-Bans, because they're fancy and they signal to the world I have good taste and I'm a fancy person. I have
Yeah, yeah.
like 10 pairs of Ray-Bans. Maybe not 10. I have like at least 5 pairs of Ray-Bans.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um Now they're not any better than other, decent quality sunglasses. The function isn't changed at all. But
Hmm.
like a pair of Ray-Bans is like $200, whereas a pair of perfectly fine sunglasses, it's like $10, $15 probably.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
desire Ray-Bans because they give me, this sign value. I not only do I
Yeah.
have good taste, but I'm the type of person who can save enough money to be able to afford 5 different pairs of Ray-Bans. So you're going to
Hmm.
see me every day of the week. And this was a thing, actually, like my coworkers used to joke. Every day of the week, I would wear a different pair of Ray-Bans. And
Yeah.
it was a thing. I don't know. I did it to feel better about myself.
Yeah. 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 So it sounds kind of trivial, but I think we all kind of do it in different ways to different extents. Like it sounds oh, oh no, people aren't hinging their identities on commodities, but then we kind of do. It keeps us protected. It keeps us feeling like we don't like we exist in the world a little bit
Mm.
more than we would otherwise, you know,
Yeah.
where we would feel kind of robbed of having um anything to sort of protect us from just the the war of all against all. You know,
Mm.
it gives us. It's funny that the market actually gives us the protection against the market.
Sorry, my camera's overheating. I had to stand up and.
Is it hot in there?
Yeah, dude. It is hot. Welcome to summer here in Arizona. So this stuff is playing out. Like,
but I wanted to say before we moved on, when it came to you're still there, right?
yeah.
Okay, yeah, you're just dark, so
Here's my other camera.
oh, there you go. Like when it comes to like Gerard, like desire's always gonna backfire. Like it's like this is why Gerard's really popular in Silicon Valley. Actually, like Peter Thiel's a really big fan of him. But I think the reason why it appeals in that context is because it's a really like status driven world, you know, where people are sort of trying to outdo each other because of status. Like, and so that's how like people in conflict end up becoming the same, and then it increases the amount of conflict like exponentially, because the reason why you're in conflict is actually because you desire the same object, and so your desire is actually making you more similar, you know. And so I like to relate that to the competition for jobs, and also the trying to prove yourself as a different kind of consumer than other people.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it is the case that like all these brave individualist entrepreneurs, they're all the same guy. They're all weird.
They're all fucking weird as shit.
They all drive the same car. They all wear the same clothes. They all have the same habits.
Even if they don't, even if they like, it's just they have the most superficial sense of differentiation. Like I wear like this brand and I wear this brand. Well, that's the most superficial sense of you both desire the commodity. Is the point.
Yeah. So like this,
and to me, it's not a them that it's like we all do it. It's inescapable because we have no choice but to. We're so dependent on the corporation. We're so dependent on the commodity. It's almost inescapable. There's almost nothing we can do about it other than to try and like psychically disinvest in what we have to do anyways. You know?
Yeah, I
like
think
at the individual level.
I think that is kind of it, because we kind of don't have a choice. Like you can't really buy things anywhere that aren't commodities, and commodities are getting worse, and shitification is real. But you kind of have no choice but to play the game. But I mean, there is something to be said for being self-aware. I was just talking to my partner this morning about BDS and like Gaza, and she's like, oh, there's more stuff got added to the BDS list. And then there's like another list that she was checking, and she's just like, there's so many lists. Like, I don't know what I'm allowed to buy and what I'm not allowed to buy anymore. Yeah. But like my response was like, well, you know, I don't care about approved boycotts and approved, you know, lists of approved commodities that you can and can't purchase, because I don't really believe that boycotts are as powerful as they used to be, because like everything is just captured, and ultimately at the end of the day, like everything is owned by the same people, and you're not hurting anybody. But there are so many lists and so many boycotts and so many things. Like we should just buy less in general. Like rather than worrying about like, oh, I need to boycott all these people. Like, well, let's just find ways we can consume less. Let's find ways we can like reduce the commodities we have in our lives, and find actual objects of use that aren't commodities. And now, how do you do that? I don't know, man. I mean, find used shit, build your own shit, try to grow your own food, try to do like mutual aid networks and stuff like that. But it's hard to do.
Well, and you're also not going to die if you have to spend, you're not going to die if you learn how to work on your car, if possible. Like
right.
if your car is old enough to work on yourself, you might actually die if you try and work on a new car. They're designed to be like unfixable by any layperson. You know, you have to be a computer programmer.
Yeah.
But if you have an older car, you're not going to die by learning to fix it yourself. Like the fact that you spend a little bit less time watching TV because you're doing that, you're going to be okay. Like in fact, you're probably going to like feel a lot better about yourself by learning how to do that. But On the other side of it, um, because you'll get a sense of like satisfaction from doing it. But on the other side of that, you genuinely can't work on new cars.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't recommend anyone do that, you know? So if you have to have a new car or you eventually we're all going to have new cars because the old cars are just going to get too old and become unfixable eventually.
Yep.
So we're all going to have new cars eventually, and we're not all going to become computer programmers. So this is why there's a limit to what we can do as individuals.
Yeah.
You know? But there's something we can do, you know, but there's a limit to it.
No, I think, yeah, starting at the level of awareness and trying to like divest some of the
It's
energy.
back to what you said about why are you becoming a punk? It's back to that.
Yeah.
It's like, why are you buying a new, even if you choose to work on your own car? What if you're just doing it because you're obsessed with your self-image as somebody who works on your own car?
Yeah.
Now you're right back into the identity trap.
Yeah.
And trying to differentiate yourself, trying to create yourself out of nothing. And that's just not how identity works. This is why it fucks with your personality to try and do that. Here's what I wanted to say earlier, and here's an even better way to put it. This is what I should have started with. Narcissism is like giving yourself a nickname. You can't do it. You can't do it.
Ooh.
Try and give yourself a nickname and make it stick. It's fucking pretentious. No one will let you do that. No one will call you what you call yourself.
Yeah.
That's what I should have started with. But
that's awesome, dude.
Yeah.
I called myself Spike one time when I was a kid because kids were like, "Hey, what's your name?" And I was like, "My name is Spike." And I thought I was so cool. I was like, how old was I? I couldn't have been more than like 6 or 7, dude.
Dude, that's a great
so
example.
Cool. Yeah, but
they were like, that's a great example because that's a great example because that makes sense to do when you're a child. But we all try and do as adults, we try and do an upscale version of that because you can't mature in this culture. You know, it's very difficult to mature in this culture. It really is. Because the ability to self-reflect and know thyself and to become something that you're proud of upon reflection, that's harder to do because we have to serve more and more. We have to serve the market. And so because we're trying more and more to run around serving the market, we're not investing in our own talents, our own callings. We're not finding out those things about ourselves, our own proclivities. We're not doing that. We're just trying to maximize shareholder profit now.
Yeah.
And so whatever we're using in the midst of doing that to feel like an individual, we're just feeling like an individual. We're not actually being one in a meaningful sense. We're not actually finding ourselves, our whatever, like our own most potentiality for being. Even if I might be bastardizing Heidegger, but I don't care. I still like to use it like that. Like even if we're doing that, like we're not doing that. We're not like ontologically becoming ourselves. You know, we're meaninglessly becoming. We're not becoming ourselves at all. We're finding meaningless differentiations.
Yeah, and we have no choice but to like. Because it's our identity and it kind of takes place in the symbolic, we have no choice but to speak in the language of the world we live in, of the world's society, whatever, and that language has been totally captured by the market. Like language itself has been commoditized. And this part is where I think like the rubber hits the road for your project and like what you're talking about, because it's like I think there's probably most people who hear you break it down would be like, yeah, Sean's right. Like I can see where he's going, or I agree with him, or yeah, he's right about that. But I think a lot of them probably wouldn't care. Like a lot of people would just say, well, it just sounds like, you're doing psychobabble, or it sounds like you're making, I don't know, you're trying to differentiate yourself by saying, I'm going to use narcissism and this and that. Like But when you get to this part and you talk about like we don't actually have the ability to invest in the type of self-reflection it would take to get to know thyself, then it does become more interesting. Then it does start to matter more. But what would you just say to someone who isn't convinced of any of your kind of argument or your position?
Yeah. Well, it's almost hard because I feel like you have to like have an intuitive sense from the beginning that something's wrong with your own world, and if you don't have that intuitive sense, like something's wrong with your neighbor, like something's wrong with you. Maybe it's maybe it's me.
Yeah.
Like if you don't have that, like socially, if you don't have that intuitive problem, and so to me, I came to this because that became an inescapable conclusion. I'm like, something is fundamentally fucked up about people, about my interactions, and it's me sometimes, and sometimes it's not, and just trying to be really honest about like what's going on, like why do I keep running into the same roadblocks? And then you go through like, oh, am I the common denominator to every situation? Maybe. But also like you're also coming out of a world that like you arrived at, even if you are the problem, even if you are the common denominator, then you still bubbled up from the world, like you still were formed and created, and your personality was created to a certain extent by the world in which you live. So like how did you end up like that? And do you know anyone else who is like that? Even if you're the problem, who else do you know is also the problem? There's other people who are the problem. You're not the only problem. So but it's kind of like just an unsettling, like if you don't have that unsettling, like things are fucked, like something's not right, then I don't know how to convince someone other than to say like try and make it more like more immediately relatable, and which is why I said I should have started with it's like giving yourself a
nickname. Yeah,
because intuitively people go, oh, you can't do that. People understand like why you can't do that.
Have you encountered people who are, first of all, living the dream, and I'm sure there are those people out there. I'm sure people who exist who think everything's fine. I don't know. I don't know if I've met many of them, but excuse me. Also, are there a lot of people who kind of reject the social aspect of it? Because it is true, we are socially constituted, and even if you arrive at this thing where you're like, well, I'm fucked up, it's true that we're socially constituted beings. So your problem, even though it's your problem, it arose in the social. But I think there are people who reject the social. I think there are people who believe, no, this is wrong on the inside of that person, and the inside belongs to the inside. The inside has nothing to do with the outside.
I thought you were going to ask a different question when you started that, so I like my mind was spinning in an opposite way. But
answer what you thought I asked.
and
then we'll unpack it.
I want to think about that though. That's true too though. But what I was thinking first, like when you started that question, I was like, I think that there's a lot of people who, I think a lot of like socialists and Marxists, and every Marxist starts out a vulgar Marxist, I think, like wants to blame everything on the material conditions. And the material conditions are a massive, and like as though psychology just doesn't exist at all.
Yeah, dude.
And that's like goofy as shit, because like humans are still here. Like you can't just completely bracket them out because we live in a human. It just doesn't make any sense. So
that would give us a world of all automatons. Once again, then we would not be actual subjects. We wouldn't be people. We would be golems. Marxism, vulgar Marxism, is narcissism.
Yeah,
Anyway.
maybe it is.
Yeah.
No, it might be. I don't know. Like, but like now I want to get to the question you were actually asking, which is like people think. So restate it again for me, if you could.
Like, just like, I think something that's always been huge for me is like being able to perform the belief, but also like actually holding the belief that I belong to something bigger than myself. Like I am just one part of my family. I am one part of my community. I am one part of humanity or humanness or whatever writ large. Like, I think probably perform that often, but I also believe it. Like we are necessarily socially constituted. Like who and what I think of arises from the distance between you and me. Like I believe that and it's not just like our symbolic identity. Like I believe our very like selfness comes from the gap. But there are people who reject that.
Well, depending on what we mean, I might agree with those people because I think there is like a hard kernel
Okay.
Of the individual. I
Sure,
think that's
yeah.
there. You know, like because and I think like I hate to be scientific about it. But it's not scientific, I think, because it does confirm a lot of intuitions that we have that like we are born a certain way and that's the way we are. Like and there's a significant part of our personality that is innate. There's a book called Innate if anyone's curious. It's about neuroscience and it's about the extent to which like what we are is what we are. And at least according to Philip Reef, like Freud believed this too to a certain extent, all the way back when. And so it's like the proclivity to be bookish is not instilled in you by your parents. You were born with a certain predisposition that would lead you to bookishness. That's already in you. You know what I mean? So like there's a certain hard kernel of character that's baked in, and finally like neuroscience is already like improving it for any of the doubters that like this is the case, you know.
So let me
Like
qualify
you don't become bookish because you were raised in a house with a lot of books.
Sure.
Like you become bookish because you had that disposition innately, you know.
Yeah. Well, and I mean I grew up running the streets, and I don't think we had any books in my home when I was growing up. So that wasn't instilled in me. If anything, I found books as an escape from the kind of the chaos of being a little hood rat. But so to qualify my position, because like we are born and we have proclivities and preponderances and predispositions and all that stuff, and then as we grow up in society, those things unfold. Sure, I think our ethical the fact that we are subjects, the fact that we're political subjects, our ethical worth and our ethical efficacy and like all these questions are social. And so subjectivity and self, like there is an element of it's the equipment that you were born with, and there's like this mechanistic metabolic thing happening in you that is very machinic. It is very much like this will be that way. But then there's that, like that's a split. Like we are animals, we are also humans, and we have the intellect and we have the ability to think and overcome. So when I do say we are like necessarily socially constituted, I'm focusing more on like the ethical side of it. Like I'm not trying to reject the fact that we have brains and we have actual like material equipment. Because I think that would be absurd.
Which the social can't really touch. It can't do much about. It can't completely take it out of you. You know?
Like if it, like I, not to go to disabilities, but disabilities are just one example of of that, like that
Yeah.
can't be refuted. Like if someone has equipment that just works a certain kind of way, no socialization or subjectivization is going to change
Yeah.
how that works.
Yeah.
Which is why autism is kind of an interesting topic here in the future. Because some people have made the claim, I think I've made the claim, autism is increasing, which would imply that it's a social thing.
Or it's the vaccines, Nance.
Or it's I forgot, dude. That's
Dude,
it.
that's what
it.
disturbed me. Like, I don't want to go on a whole thing, but I've just been thinking about this as like I'm sympathetic to certain like people who are worried about vaccines. I really am.
For sure.
But what disturbs the shit about the anti-vax movement is that the narrative that I'm familiar with is that it starts with parents trying desperately to kick the autism out of their kids.
Jesus.
And that's the thing that's discrediting to me about it. Not that they're resistant to science or like professionals jamming shit down their throats or that they're skeptical of the government. I think we should be all of those things.
100%.
But the thing that makes me like grossed out about it is that like the narrative I'm familiar with is that that's where it really begins, is people like thinking that their kids are like basically being socially humiliated that their kid turned out autistic. And I'm like, dude, have you met autistic people? They're fine. Like they're weird, sure, in a way, but like they live full lives. They learn how to deal with it. Like they're fine. So like, I mean, there have been examples of like parents killing their children on accident with weird pseudoscientific cures.
Yeah.
Accidentally killing their kids because they were trying to get the autism out of them so desperately. So anyway, that's a whole just went down a rabbit trail there, but it's just been on my mind. I'm listening to anti-vax people and I'm like, I see where you're coming from. I really do. And I sympathize on a lot of things. And like they did used to have mercury in the vaccines. They took it out apparently, but they did used to have it. And like, we shouldn't just trust some like government asshole to inject us with whatever. Like, you know, like I understand where all that nervousness comes from, but I'm also like, yeah, that's the part that's really disturbing to me about it, about the whole thing. Yeah.
That sucks.
Yeah. Because like autistic people they're fine. Leave them alone. Like they're just people, you know, with like some quirks. They're fine. You know,
we all got quirks. We all got our quirks.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry to drag us down.
No, but it's true, dude. Like that's a valid point to raise. Like you shouldn't make fun of people who are anti-vax and say, "Oh, they're stupid, they're horrible." But you should disagree with people who are abusing their children because shit like that.
Yeah. Not that they all are either. It's
for
just
sure
that if this comes from that place, then maybe we should be just as skeptical about it as we are about the doctors and the medical establishment, which we should also be skeptical about. You know.
Yeah. So. I guess kind of staying with like a similar vibe, like talking about making the claim that autism is increasing in the world we live in today.
Yeah.
It could kind of be the case that you're making the claim that narcissism or whatever this dysfunction is, whatever this breakdown is increasing in society today.
Yeah. That's Lash's position, and I've just said, yeah, Lash is right. Then, and it's just getting worse. That's my position. It's just accelerated. Whatever Lash said, when he's talking about like the 1970s, like that trend is just accelerated. It's just pedal to the floor at this point. It's just getting worse. He was right, and it's
only gotten worse since then.
Yeah.
One thing I really like. Is when you're talking about the suburbs and you're talking about, because I think that is, I I don't know, like it's a weird thing, and it seems like there's like these social trends and like shit with the economy and commodity is happening on one side, but then there's also these tendencies in people and like social proclivities and shit like that. So it's like a weird double acceleration. With our homes, with where we live and how we live and where we work and how we get to and from work and how we conduct ourselves and shit like that. I don't know. I kind of want to hear you just like say something about kind of suburbs and post-modernity and the individuals, the fake individuals or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. And I actually, I was thinking about the commodity too. And that's related to the suburbs because that's the commoditization of homes, that's turning homes into commodities where you're more worried about the resale value than you are worried about you're not like something can begin as a commodity and then you take it out of being a commodity because you're going to pass it down to your children. You're not going to sell it again, so it's been a commodity once. But if you're worried about the resale value of your house at that point, you're living in a commodity. And so what does that do? And speaking of the commodity, like Lash actually says, and I still think what I said was right, that we use the commodity to differentiate ourselves. But he kind of distances himself from that and says that like the main point behind the psychic problem that the commodity gives us is actually that the commodity is so temporary and it's designed to be so temporary and it's so novel that the main problem is that it focuses us on the future rather than the past. So this is why we don't give a shit about traditions. In general, as Americans, we don't. We have a culture obsessed with novelty. We want the next thing coming out of the corporation, and this is why I'm like, do we have a culture or do we have a pseudo culture? Because can you have a culture that has no tradition? Is that still a culture? And even when we invent a tradition, like no homage is paid to what just came before it. Like hip hop is a tradition. But do the hip hop artists of today pay homage to the hip hop artists of the past? A lot of them, I would argue, don't at all. Some of them do. A lot of them don't. A lot of them don't give a shit about anyone who came before them at all.
Yeah.
That's just one example. You could say that about everything, though. You could say that about just about everything. You could say that about pop music. Do people who like pop music today care about where it came from? Do they care about funk and disco? Do they care about Michael Jackson even? Do they care about any of this? Or they just care about Miley Cyrus now? Most people, I don't think, like have a really deep understanding. Maybe not most people. Maybe it's just some people. But you know what I'm talking about. At least some people have just don't give a shit about where their own music came from and about like who came before, who they're listening to now, and how the person that they're listening to now got created. It's this constant obsession with novelty. So that actually, it might be even more important than trying to distinguish ourselves and differentiate ourselves, that the commodity focuses, can't talk, focuses us. It's weird to say, on the novel, on what's next, on what's new, and not caring about what came behind us, like tradition isn't a stodgy thing. There's cultural traditions and they matter, like rock came out of blues. That actually matters. Otherwise, we don't understand the rock we're listening to now.
Sure.
I think, but to circle back to your original thing about the suburb is like, that's what we're doing with the land. That's what we're doing with our homes. Our home enters this world of being the novel thing continually destroyed. Like what suburb is named after what's there? Like suburbs it's not a point original to me, but suburbs are named after what they were destroyed to put them there. Like Madrona Drive is the street I grew up on. There's no Madrona trees there. There's not one. There probably was at one point, but they're all gone now. So we name these suburbs after like what we put in it. So there's this the revolutionary, constantly this churn, constantly destroying. I'm probably using it in a different way than you are, but like constantly destroying the past and just replacing it over and over again, you know?
Yeah. I like that. I think I would push back a bit on hyping up tradition so much, although it is still very problematic to be constantly oriented toward the future, and kind of stuck in that anticipation, because then you're never in the moment. So you're never actually like living your life and experiencing the things you're experiencing and making the choices and actually being engaging in ethical life. You're always just looking forward to a projection that the commodity is projecting out ahead of you. Now, traditions are important and they do matter. However, I also think the present matters, and the commodity kind of forecloses the present and keeps us oriented toward that future. And I don't know, maybe that's just like a reaction to the word tradition. Like maybe I'm doing extra work because I don't like the word tradition. But I don't know. I also think like being in the present moment and existing and like engaging ethically is what we're missing out on when we're trapped in that anticipation.
To try and sell you on tradition a little bit, is that like you don't get Prince if he only cares about his contemporary musicians in his own moment. You don't get that. You don't get, he doesn't exist as the Prince we know. You know what I mean? If he only cares about the musicians making music now. Yeah. He's rooted in a long musical tradition. Yeah. You know.
We do need roots.
So tradition, I don't think tradition is I think it's like rootedness. It's life-giving. I don't see it as oppressive. In certain cases it can be, you know, like it but that's just to say that like anything can be oppressive. Like so can the future be oppressive. Like that's what Mike, you just wrote a whole book about how oppressive the future is, you know? So anything can be oppressive or not. So the default to think that tradition is always bad, tradition is always oppressive, I think is like, you know, that's part of the problem that we're living in today.
For sure. I like it. And dude, I do think it's this kind of ongoing churn, constantly deterritorializing, reterritorializing, recoding, overcoding. And nothing is real and nothing is happening except that novelty, or I think it's even false novelty, because nothing is like new. It's just all marketing. Like it's all just marketing.
But also like practically too, the suburbs also, like Putnam and Bowling alone, there are 3 problems which has led to the decline of he's a sociologist, so he's just doing like empirical studies, and he's like a scientific one, so he's not trying to go out on a limb. He's just looking at the numbers, and we do socialize less today than we did in the 1950s, empirically. And the suburbs are the 3 reasons are the suburbs, the TV, and now today you could extend the internet too, but the suburbs, TV, and the fact that women women are in the workkose now. Those are the 3 reasons that he comes up with. And obviously the last one is like, you know, it's not acceptable to me that they weren't allowed in the workplace, but now they have to be. So we're talking about a qualitative change as well as, you know, like it's like women also don't have the freedom now to not be in the workplace more than they did in the 1950s, at least depending on what demographic you're talking about. But
and that was the social
cuts both ways.
Those were like those.
The fact that somebody had time to schmooze and somebody had time to organize shit, like that's really the point. It's not about like women should be doing that. It's that somebody once upon a time had time, you know.
And now everybody's in a dual income family and they still can't afford anything.
Yeah.
So I think you have an interesting point about community, or you had in the conversation we had, you had an interesting point about community. And I think we agree, but the way you said it was, I was like, whoa, dude, you're wrong. But then we actually talked about it, and I was like, oh, you're not wrong. You're right. But it had to do with identification and like pure positivity, and affirmation and community. And I don't know.
And that's another one of those words that at first blush to a lot of people is like bad, off the cuff. And I just think this is some like something we just kind of need to get over, because I feel like community, it's just a thing. It's not inherently bad or good. It can be bad, but that's why we want a beloved community. We want a community that builds people up, not a community that is like a cult or like tries to stultify them. We don't want that community. Not all communities are the same. They're just a thing. And we want good ones. Like, it's just that simple. And like, if we think community is bad from the get-go, then there's nothing we can do.
Yeah.
There's nothing at all we can do, because we can't start at the level of like the government. Like, how are you supposed to build? You got to start somewhere is the point. So you got to start at the individual and in your friend groups and your family. In other words, community, so you got to start somewhere.
And that was basically the point you made, was that community is good actually. And I was like, whoa. But then you went on to say like, no, we need a community that can withstand difference and negation, and that's actually inclusive, and that you actually belong to, not what gets sold to us as community, the hyper real community, the commoditized version of community.
And we need to like, I don't know. I think that there's a lot of negativity when it comes to community. There's a lot of like a good negativity. There's like I don't know. I just think it's like just having people around who you can like, you disagree with one person, you can actually go to someone else. Like having extended families, I think is just really good for kids who grew up with extended families with aunts and uncles around, so that if like mom treats you unfairly, or mom like, or dad, whichever, like you have someone else you can turn to who can go, actually, no, your dad was treating you right. Like, this is what you need to do. Or vice versa, can like in a really bad situation can intervene and protect you from another family member that's doing something bad. So the solution isn't like, oh, family seems oppressive, make it smaller. Fuck no, family seems oppressive, make it bigger. Is the solution,
Allow it to support itself and let it actually unfold the way it needs to take care of itself. Because if you want global change, you have to start locally. You have to start somewhere. We can't just wake up tomorrow and have all these problems solved.
And that might sound kind of like stupid or cheesy to somebody, but I'm like, it's true though. Like, you do have to start somewhere, and like, otherwise you're expecting someone to come in and save you. Otherwise you're just waiting around for something to happen. So you do, no matter what, you have to start at the level of the individual and the level of the people around you,
and work to build real community.
And to do that, we have to be the type of people who care to do that. And I don't think we are. To do that, we have to be the type of people who are capable of sustaining communities. We have to be like, I don't know, reliable and dependable and give a shit about the world around us. And most of us don't really. I do think that's kind of true. It's kind of like, it sounds kind of like moralizing and conservative, but I think that and there are, to be fair, a lot of like material reasons why. Like, I don't really give a shit about a lot of the things around me, because like, I know that realistically, me pouring my efforts into fixing those things will come to nothing because I'm surrounded by intractable bureaucracy on all sides. And I don't want to waste my life fighting for one little change in my local community that I know I'll just be like alone running uphill about. So I don't give a shit, you know? So I see problems at my fucking front door and I just ignore them, you know, because I'm like, I don't want to be one person like trying to fight for something that realistically might never change. Because, like I said, intractable bureaucracy everywhere you look. And that's not just government bureaucracy, that's also corporate bureaucracy.
Yeah.
Bureaucracy is bureaucracy. The corporation is an invention of the state. There's no such thing as a libertarian today because almost all of them don't differentiate between the corporation and the family business. They act like they're the same, you know? It's just like there's no conservatives because they all live in the suburbs. There's no such thing as a conservative today because the suburb is like fucking postmodernism. It's like you live in a commodity, you know? You live in a commodity, you depend on a commodity to get anywhere. I mean your car. And everyone in the household has to own a car. You're completely car dependent. Well, that undermines the very social fabric that once made like Americans a very uniquely democratic people, a very uniquely politically engaged people. So if you don't care about that tradition, how are you a conservative exactly?
Yeah.
You know, based on how you live and where you live, I don't see how that's the conservatism that if I were to care about conservatism, I would care about is like, how do we make Americans a meaningfully socially engaged people? As in, and by that, I mean a people with power, you know, people who can direct their own destiny and change the course of history. That's the democracy I believe in. And that's the tradition I would aspire to. So I don't know what conservatives. So when people say that they're conservatives, I don't know what you're talking about, you know? Because you watch Fox News, how is that different? Like I don't see how that's conservative. I don't understand.
Yeah.
Because you voted for Trump, I don't necessarily see how he's conservative. You know, in certain ways he is. In certain ways, like in like common sense, I can see how he's trying to bring the jobs back to America. So in certain ways, I can see how he's sort of conservative, but like, why is that the one thing we're talking about? Why aren't we talking about the fact that the small town is eroded and dead? And that the corporation did that. And yet people have no critique of capitalism at all. How are you a conservative with no critique of capitalism when capitalism is the thing that's undoing the social fabric, that's that's destroying the small town? And making big cities unlivable as well by driving up the cost of just existence, driving up the cost of rent.
Yeah.
You know?
Scathing critique, man. Them's fighting words. But no, I like it. And it is silly that people conflate kind of reactionary stances with conservatism. And yeah, there's nothing to conserve. But the endless
it's
churn,
kind of already gone. Like, you know, I wish there was something to conserve, but most of it that was worth conserving is sort of gone already.
Yeah. So all that said, I don't know, do you want to, sum up your position or your argument or leave the fine folks at home with any parting words or anything like that? Because I mean, you did kind of give them a pretty powerful last little 10 minutes there.
Yeah, I guess to me, I'm just trying to get to the bottom of understanding like what's going on and like why people might be unorganizable, you know, like and I don't want that to be the case at all. I hope people are organizable, but I'm just saying, like, if people are unorganizable, it's because they lack certain virtues that we need them to have. That and one of those virtues is like being a genuine individual, not a bullshit one.
Mm.
Um, and I think that has to do with actually being separate from the public, having some distance from the public. And by
Mm.
that I mean the market, you know. So you have to have some distance from that. You have to have a interior reflective life. You can't just be striving after everything you're essentially told to strive after, which is prestige, money, these sorts of things. But I acknowledge that that's a fucking uphill battle in the world we live in, just realistically. Like, we have
Mm.
to survive. But the least we can do is not try and turn survival into an end in itself. Like,
Mm.
who cares that you survive in a world that's not worth living in? Uh, like let's assume that the world's not worth living in. Why should you be proud of the fact that you're surviving in it?
Mm.
I'm not saying that it's not worth living in, but I'm just saying, like, if at some point we're going to get to a world the way things are going that is genuinely not worth living in.
Yeah.
And for some people, I understand right now why some people have come to the conclusion that it's not.
Yep.
So there's a lot of psychic pain going on, and we're covering it up with bullshit a lot of the time.
Yeah.
There's a lot of cope going on, and talking about it in terms of narcissism isn't a way to like find out who the baddies are and exclude them. It's also introspective to be like, what are the ways in which I am just part of the fucking machine? And in precisely in the ways that I'm trying to be unique, the trying to be myself. Are there ways in which the ways in which I'm trying to be myself are the ways in which I'm being part of the machine,
Mm.
So we just need that introspection. I really think we do. We need to work on Bildung. We need to work on cultivating our own virtues and not worrying about, we're not worrying as much about the material outcomes and how we look. We need to like be confident in ourselves, and in order to do that we have to like wrestle with ourselves. So that's where I'm at, and like that's what I'm trying to get to the bottom of. And I think that there's just a lot of fake bullshit motherfuckers out there, and that I don't want to be one of them. I'm trying not to be one of them, So
So
yeah.
get a mirror, take a long hard look. Don't fall in love with your reflection. But don't ever allow yourself to be lulled into some kind of tranquilizing satisfaction with your reflection. The world is a fucked up place.
You are, first and foremost, you are your potentiality for being. You are first and foremost and above all your I could be otherwise.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like that is putting that at the core of yourself, like what you could be rather than what you are. Like, I think another way to put narcissism is it's like forgetting that negativity, forgetting the negativity that is there in everybody, that they could be otherwise than they are, that there were other paths that they could have chosen.
Yeah, it does sound like it's this false belief that you're this self-same unique snowflake.
Yeah, but crucially, it's defensive. Crucially, you have the material conditions are so important to bring in. Crucially, it's because you're embattled, because you have no grounding, because no one said that, like, you don't have a stable symbolic identity rooted in the community. You don't have that to be something that you can look back on reflection and be like, I'm proud of this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're not that either, but it's easier to find, like, when you live within a community that tells you who you are, it's easier actually to find that negativity, because you instantly go, no, I'm not.
Yeah.
No, I'm not. I could be otherwise.
And then you can go work on becoming.
Yeah.
You're not spending all your time trying to worry about, like, well, I am being.
And so that someone doesn't think I'm trying to return to the pre-modern. I'm not trying to do that at all. I like modernity. To me, modernity is, this is who I am. because this is what I'm good at or have been able to achieve, but I could have been otherwise, right? It's not, like modernity gives you a choice about which community, which you want to give you your identity. And to me, post-modernity is there is no community. See the difference there? You do
Yeah.
get to choose in modernity which community you want to give your to derive your identity from. But post-modernity is just like there is no community, so I'm going to create a scramble to create an identity out of nothing, you know? So
So it's
yeah, I'm a conservative for modernism, like in a way. Like I'm not a conservative for like returning us to a time before we had the ability to choose. I don't want to do that to anyone, you know?
I think that's interesting. I think post-modernity is changing. But I mean, I want to do this whole cyber Luddite movement, and I think a huge part of that is conserving the good parts of modernity, because I don't really distinguish between modernity and post-modernity. I think it's the same thing.
It is in a way. Yeah, it is. It's almost just like post-modernity is an accelerated version of modernity.
Yeah.
But my point is like maybe we should have stopped in a sense at a certain point, and now that we're in this land of like total deterritorialization almost, and like and then like recapture by the corporation, we do have to figure out a way forward. So we can't just long for a time that was. We do have to figure out a way. The only way out is through at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So that's something I haven't fully wrestled with, is like I'm trying to understand the problem, but then when it comes to the solution, I'm barely scratching the surface of
I don't
think about how the fuck we go through this, you know. But understanding the problem is like how, to me, that's gonna inform the rest. Like how do we get out of this? You know, if we understand the problem, that's the only way we can pick a direction. I think.
I don't believe in solutions. I don't think there are solutions. We have to innovate. We have to create the solutions. So yeah, understanding the problem, I think, is the most important thing. And I think your position is instructive, at least for me, because it tells me like, oh, I need to worry about me and what I am doing, and how can I become a better subject? Like, how can I actually become a better member of this team human? I don't want to fall into this false identity affirmation bullshit. What the book Innate? Who wrote that? Because I want to look it up.
Let me look it up. I don't remember the name of the author. Books. Kevin J. Mitchell. Innate: How the Wiring of Our Brains Shapes Who We Are.
Mitchell.
I like how he like starts out in that, because he's like, yeah, most parents, you ask them and they're like, how did your kid end up becoming like wanted to become a doctor or whatever? And they're like, I don't fucking know. Like, it's just that one turned out that way, and I had this one and that one turned out that way. I didn't do anything, you know. That's just like they've always kind of been that way, you know.
Always kind of been that way. Kind of been that way. I think dude, I think there's room. I think there's room for both. But you said like the could have been otherwise when it comes to like the good part about identity. This is who I am because of what I've done, what I've been able to achieve, and you know where I found myself and where I was able to get to. But I could have been otherwise. I think that's like that does so much heavy lifting. And there's room for both. Like there's room for they've always been that way and could have been otherwise, because there is this tension in the individual subject. And I think talking about narcissism is asking the individual out there to reflect and actually manage that tension, because there is a tension between you were always this way and you could have been otherwise. And it's an individual tightrope. That you have to walk on your own.
And I think that the narcissistic response is to like defensively react to that as like it's to defensively react to the I could have been otherwise as like no I am,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
like no I am this.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, clinging to something desperately.
Yeah.
Um, and I think it's a defensive posture, and it comes off sometimes as like powerful.
Mm.
You know, it manifests
Yeah,
as
because it's
like
pure affirmation. It's like, no,
yeah.
this is the way it is, and I don't care about your hypotheticals. Could have been
Yeah.
otherwise. I am this way now, and I am imposing myself on the
Hmm.
world.
Yeah, and
Um,
sometimes that's the result. Sometimes it results in an extremely manipulative, power hungry person who like a megalomania, you know,
mhm.
the
Like Howard
sometimes that is
Hughes.
the result. Not always, like because you can't look at any sort of like external behavior and be like, oh, unless you have to experience it over like a period of time. You have to really like sit with it and see the pattern, and then like you have to be able to recognize. You have to know the person. You can't see it from the outside and be like that
For
person's a
sure.
narcissist.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
that. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. Like it
yeah,
has to
yeah,
be like
yeah,
a sustained thing. But no, I think it's fair to discuss because we're discussing society and we're discussing tendencies. Like you're
yeah,
not out here giving diagnoses.
yeah,
I care very little about diagnoses in the world we live in today.
yeah,
Now, that's not to say
yeah.
that they don't matter and that's not real. Psychology is supremely important. But in the world we live in today, diagnoses are
Yeah.
not the end all be all. I mean, kids read the DSM-5 on their own and they go and they self-diagnose. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
we can all collectively pump the brakes when it comes to seeking diagnoses, and use these kind of terms and structures to talk about society and trends that exist in the social.
Hmm. Yeah, and I'm not interested in, like I said, like trying to figure out who the narcissists are and then exclude them.
For
So
sure.
not the fucking point, you know, like uh all I care about is that introspection, which includes like I need to do that shit too.
For
And
sure.
what matters to me is the development of our character, you know. And so that sometimes means finding someone who's a little narcissistic, and instead of being like excluding them and thinking that you solved the problem, uh that might
Fuck
be a
with them.
narcissistic response that you just did.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like you know, so like if possible you need to like fuck with them and like try and make them a mature adult, because a narcissism is it's like a juvenile response. It's like a trying, like I said, trying to run back to the womb. It's a returning to a like primary narcissism. We all had that, and we all have narcissism, right? So like secondary or pathological narcissism is when you're like trying to sprint back to this like comfort that you are missing out on. It's
Yeah.
like being a scared little boy pretending like you're an adult, you know,
Yeah, and like
or
fronting and
or
posturing
scared
and
little. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and that's why it comes off as like a lot of the time very like very arrogant. You know, that's the reason for that, and why it sometimes it manifests as a lot of arrogance,
Mm.
because you're trying to puff yourself up because you know you're nothing, you know.
Yeah. I think yeah, I don't know. Like it's an individual, it's a singular thing that we all have to wrestle with on our own, and just encouraging people to have the courage to do that, have that wrestling match with yourself. Like I genuinely think that's all you're doing. And I know people have responded in different ways to things you've said. I think everything you say is great and I love it. And I try to do self-reflection and because you can't control other people, you can't fix other people's problems, you can't do any of that shit. And if you are convinced that the world is a fucked up place, which it is, you have to start locally. And what's more local than with your own interiority? So,
Yeah.
yeah, dude, I like it a lot. We'll go ahead and cut the recording and all that stuff. So people listening, people viewing, thank you. Bye bye. We'll see you on the
Bye-bye,
next one.
people.